Oh, hello, family. Welcome back once again. Good to see you. Good to see you. And also, too, if you're first time viewing the video, make sure you subscribe, put a like on it, and also, too, turn your notification bell on so that way you'll know next time I post the next video. Today, we're going to talk about one thing, and I want to do some clarification for it. It's called your M.2 drive. Now, some motherboards, they have one M.2 drive, some have two M.2, some have three, some have four, some have five. We're going to try to clarify it a little bit with three M.2 drives today. So what I'm going to do is what I found to be easy for everybody to find out is that Amazon always carries pictures. Let me slide this up a little bit. Amazon always carries pictures when it comes to your motherboards and giving you a great spec to look at. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to drop over to Amazon and we're going to show you how to step-by-step set up your M.2 drive. So let's go ahead and slide over to Amazon and see what's cooking. Okay, now we got you over here on Amazon. We're going to slide our face right here down, and we're going to make our face a little bit bigger so that way y'all can see us. All right. Hopefully y'all didn't get, seasick me doing that. I do apologize about that. But what we're going to do today is we're going to show you what you can find on Amazon. And it's very simple. When you go to search for a motherboard, okay, they give you all the helpful hints that you can get. We're like right here, I have a motherboard that's pulled up. It's the ASRock B650 PG Lightning. Since this motherboard's a very inexpensive motherboard, but it's pretty good to use as a test subject. So you're learning that, in order to put your M.2 drive in, you have to come in an angle and meet up. There's little dips. There's one little dip that's in there for your NVMe drive. Okay, so basically a motherboard like this, you're going to look at it like this. Closest to the processor right here is your first M.2 drive. This one either going to be PCIe 4.0 or it's going to be PCIe 5.0. Now, if it's 5.0, some motherboard manufacturers make this 2 lanes with the 5.0, but they make it 4 lanes with the 4.0. So either, you follow the motherboard's specifications. This way, for a fact, that way you can, what drive you can plug into the first one. Me, right now, I like the PCIe 4.0 4 lanes is because it's 4 lanes. They say the 5.0 is faster switching with the 2 lanes, but it's still in its infancy, new stage, so I'm not going to recommend that right now. So I would say the 4.0, if you're running 7,000 reads and you're running 7,000 writes off of this drive here, this would be good for your secondary drive. Now, I know y'all are thinking, why did he say secondary drive? Well, the thing is this, the way I got my PC set up is that this right here is my secondary drive. I use that for gameplay, setting my games from Steam onto this drive and separating it away from the operating system. Operating system really doesn't use that much to where you're really going to need it for high-speed switching. You can still run it and get good gameplay off of it, from a different avenue other than just putting everything all on one drive. Putting everything all on one drive, basically you're limiting your speed ability and basically splitting the amount of reads and writes between your operating system and your applications. So by taking and putting your applications on a secondary drive is really a good thing. Instead of putting them all on the primary drive, if you put them onto the secondary drive, the secondary drive has nothing else, has no operating system, has nothing that's going to restrict the amount of speed that it's going to consume for your programs. So, and plus this being closest to the processor and being PCIe 4.0, having 4 lanes, you should have less problems with that there. Now, if you have, let's say, 2 drives, 2 M.2 slots that you can put drives on, okay, like here, you have, probably because I got my big head in the way, let me reduce that a little bit. Okay, so now, with right here, having a second drive, this could be either PCIe 3.0 or it could be PCIe 4.0. Now, since this has got, this is just an example. Usually this is how they would do your motherboards. They would put one down close to the coprocessor, which is right here. And this does your switching for your SATA drives and, your USB drives and stuff like that. It does many different things down here. So they tell you if you're going to use the M.2 drive down here, not to populate your SATA drives, which plug into here. And the reason why you don't populate those is because they're already in use by your M.2. You can't use external SSDs. Basically, they tell you get 6 slots, SATA slots. They tell you can only populate the first 4, and the last 2 is 5 and 6. Depends on your motherboard manufacturer. Dealing with Asus, this is how they tell you: 5 and 6, you don't populate, but 1 through 4 you can populate. Me, I would only recommend populating 1 and 2. The first and the second SATA, if you're going to use external drives. They're internal drives, but they're external plug-in to the motherboard. Now, internal plug-in to the motherboard would be your M.2. External plug-in inside your case for your drives, if you want them separate from the motherboard, separate SSDs, then I would only populate SATA 1 and SATA 2. That's just me. Okay, I would leave 3, 4, 5, and 6. If you got 3 M.2 drives, I would leave 3, 4, 5, and 6 unpopulated. If you're going to put extra drives beyond the 3 M.2s that you would put onto your motherboard, I would only populate 1 and 2 on the SATA. If I wanted extra amount of hard drive space, solid state drive space, I would do that. But understand this. If you populate PCIe, your first PCIe slot, which would be right here, it'd be either a 4.0 or a 5.0. Depending on the motherboard and the setup, they could take away from 8 lanes away from your graphics card. Instead of it being PCIe X16, 4.0 X16, it could populate it to PCIe 4.0 X8 just by using this top slot. Sometimes. This is where you're going to have to test. With your secondary drive, you plug it into your top slot, and then you take and look on, let's say, HW Info and see how many lanes your graphics card is using. If your graphics card uses PCIe 4.0 X16 and you're only getting PCIe 4.0 X8 populating the top M.2 slot, then you have to make a decision. It's either you want to populate that slot with an M.2 for your games, or you can leave it empty and have the full X16 go into your graphics card. Now, me, if I found out that it took away lanes from my graphics card, I would not populate that slot. That's just me. Because going down here, this has got 3 M.2s total that you can put on the motherboard. See, it's already got a second slot, which has a secondary PCIe X8 slot for a graphics card. So that would be the one that I use for the secondary drive right here, is because that second graphics card slot I'm not using. So I would use the M.2 there, because then it would take up the lanes of that secondary graphics card, which I don't use. So you can plug it in right there. That would be a PCIe 4.0 as well. Now going over here to your third slot, that could be PCIe 3.0, which would populate your SATA controls 5 and 6. Okay, so you still wouldn't use 5 and 6, but this slot right here, I would use a PCIe 3.0 M.2, one that has 5,000 read and writes, and I would use my operating system there. Like I told you, your operating system don't need that much to operate your PC. So having 5,000 read and writes off an M.2 drive that's plugged into that slot for your operating system is fine. I run PCIe 3.0, and I run 5,000 reads and writes off of my M.2, and it never runs up that high, but it never takes away from the speed of my operating system. My operating system runs normally, and as weird as that sounds, it runs just as fast if I plugged it into the 4.0 to the 3.0. I did it this way because I wanted high-speed switching for my games on my M.2. Because on my motherboard, I have one PCIe, or I have one M.2 Gen 4, and I have one M.2 Gen 3. I only got two on mine. So my Gen 4 is my secondary drive, and my Gen 3 is my primary operating system. So PCIe 3.0 X4 M.2, the NVMe drive, runs my operating system. And my secondary is PCIe 4.0, and that runs at 7,000 reads, 5,000 writes. I know when I bought the drive, but it's 2 terabyte secondary drive. And my third one that I plugged into the first slot is a supposed to be a 16 terabyte drive broken down to 14 terabytes. But that's a regular hard drive, so that's just for storing. I'm not using an SSD there. It's just a regular hard drive, 7,200 RPM, server grade hard drive for that slot. That's it. Now, if I want to put a second one in, I can get a second one and then, plug it in. I don't have to mirror the drives, is because they're only populated for the amount of space that I need for my computer. I don't need, it to be set up like, mirror drives to where, they're both into one. 2 separate drives is fine for me. That's if I need more space for videos and stuff like that. But coming to the point of your drive, okay, y'all think I'm crazy for doing this. Anybody can think whatever they want until they try it, until they test it to see if it works for them on their motherboard. Then that's the way, the cookie crumbles. Me, I've tested it both ways. I've tested the, switching the 2 drives. Even though it's a 3.0, I put it into 4.0, and I took the 4.0 and put it into 3.0. And I switched the 2 drives to find out that I get better gaming performance putting the 4.0 secondary drive closest to the processor. And my 3.0 drive that has my operating system that's linked to the coprocessor. I've found it just to be better that way. Now, with you guys having these motherboards with this 5.0, 4.0 AM5 motherboard, that might change the factor of your X16 slot for your graphics card. So if it does, then you're going to have to back things down. Like, leave this empty right here, and then go to the second one and use that for your secondary drive, which links to the secondary slot for your graphics card. This one right here links to your primary slot for your graphics card. So you might end up losing lanes. That's not good. You want as many lanes as you can get to your graphics card. If it's 4.0 X16, you want that to your graphics card. So you leave this unpopulated here. Now right here, this you can populate because you're not using that slot. Use that for your M.2. You'll get the full 4 lanes off your PCIe 4.0 and you'll be happy. For your secondary. Now for your operating system, I would put it here. I really would. Now if your M.2 is on the back side for your 3.0 of your motherboard, I would take that into consideration of taking your operating system and putting it back there, because that will be the least amount of drive that you would ever have to mess with in a lifetime, because it's just housing your operating system. If you're keeping all your programs on your secondary drive, which would be right here in front, then your operating system program, your operating and your M.2 for your operating system doesn't have to be in show, because you're rarely going to replace it. So I would put that on the back. If your motherboard has it to where you got 3.0 on the back side of the motherboard, that's where I would put your operating system. This way you have full potential. Say this is on the back side, you put your operating system here, you'll put your secondary drive right here, which will populate your secondary X16 drive for your secondary for your graphics card. So you don't need to populate that drive. Now your X16 right here for your main primary discrete graphics card will be right here. Now there's a little bit of a twist. If you operate a motherboard like this, and this is an AMD class motherboard, a Ryzen motherboard, and let's say you get integrated graphics, and you're saying to yourself, well, what if I got integrated graphics? What then? 9 out of 10 chances might happen is that you're running your iGPU there, but now you might be able to use this since your iGPU is connected on different lines. Might. Not saying it would. Might. And then you can decide if you want to put your operating system right here and then put your secondary drive right here. The closer you get your secondary drive to your processor, the better the shorter distance that it has to work between your M.2 and your processor. So that's the shortest distance you want for your secondary. Now your operating system's not going to matter because it's going to map everything, and it's just going to sequentially map everything for you, so that way everything flows correctly. But mainly way Steam plays is it operates off of mainly off whatever drive you put your games on is what it's going to operate off of. So basically you can move your Steam games to different drives. Okay, now knowing that comes to the second part. Now that you see how that works, now this is the second part. This right here, this motherboard's 120 bucks. And if you're thinking about going to AM5, the PG Lightning motherboards have always been good. So just let you know, and having that kind of price, that's not too bad. Okay, now let's click out of here. Yes, I know I still have that up there for some apparent reason. It's just there. But I do have live Saturdays at 11 a.m. So, and we do talk about AMD, NVIDIA, and sometimes Intel, Asus, Gigabyte, MSI, all them. So I will have to make me a new banner for that. I think that'd be pretty cool. So, but let's get to the brass tacks. Okay, when it comes to your operating, now that you got your M.2 drive plugged in, now what you want to do is you want to right click and you want to go to disk management, and it'll bring you up a window for your disk management. It'll bring your disk 0, your disk 1, and your disk 2. Now my disk 2 is my C drive. You don't want to mess with your C drive. Now let's say your secondary drive is your D drive, but it says unallocated. So you right click, and then what you do is you hit format. And I'm not going to format my drive, but you hit format. It should format the drive. It'll ask you if you want you want it to be a GPT drive. That's what your whole purpose is. You want it to be a GPT drive. This says NTFS, but it's still GPT. Do you understand that? For some reason, and get this, for some reason, Windows 11 made them all say NTFS. But it's supposed to be GPT. They might have changed the name, but I'm showing you my secondary drive and the properties. Once you got it formatted and it's all set and to go, then it should show up in your Explorer, your Windows Explorer. Once you have it correct, it'll show right here as nothing on it in your Windows Explorer. Okay, but you'll notice that it'll say allow files on this drive to have content indexed in addition to file properties. That's checked. But you'll notice on your secondary drive that it says compress this drive to save disk space. And you'll notice that I have it checked for my secondary drive. Yes, it does not affect. Don't do this to your primary drive, your operating system. Do not do this. Your secondary or any other drives that's separate from your operating system, not a problem. I do it because it saves space. So that's just the way it is. So once you know now that you got your D drive and you're all set there, now let's say you want to go to Steam. So now that you've set all your drives up and you know how to get there, you X out of that, and then you can go into Steam. Okay. Now, let me get this out of my way. Now you got up top, you have settings right there at the top. Now you can go down to where it says storage. And right here is where your games are stored. Now, if I want to move them to free up space, I moved most of my games here to free up space. Okay. Now, if I want to move everything away from my C drive, let's say I want to move this one right here. You check mark it and then hit move. And then it'll ask you what drive to move it to. And let's say I want to move it to D drive. And then hit move. But If it's got shared content, it'll let you know. So mine won't move. That's the thing. Mine won't move. These two won't move. I already know that. But just to for say, you can move any one of your games to any one of your drives. Now, mostly 90% of my games, 95, 96, because of those two, but they're right here on my secondary drive. And that is my fastest SSD. So that means, guess what? My games are going to run at a great FPS and everything else because I split away those games from my main operating system. These are, once Steam's loaded, the only games get accessed from whatever drives they're located on. So the access is just going between the games and Steam, not the operating system. It's just going directly from the games to Steam. So whatever speed of that drive you got set up on it, and your network, your internet networking is another thing you have to think about. If you got, let's say, you got 300 megs of download speed and you got 30 megs of upload speed, and you'll be fine on Steam. So that's just for your internet. Now for this, my write to this drive is 5,000 and my reads is 7,000. My firmware is all up to date, and plus also too, it has a very high amount of cache. So now the games can utilize the cache that's on this SSD, this M.2 SSD, making the switching a little bit faster. So that's how you can set yours up if you want. That's how I got mine set up. Okay, mine is set up this way. I don't have a problem with my games. Actually, my speed for my games is really good. My FPS is really great on the games. Let's go back to the main screen and give you my final thought, and then we'll leave it at that. Okay, final thought. I know some people are going to be hell-bent against it. They're going to say, well, your operating system needs that speed. Your secondary drive doesn't. This is where the big misconception comes in. Big misconception. Now you have to understand something. Steam is only an app. It's a loader. It's a like Second Life. It's a viewer. Once it loads, then all your games are there. They're just like connections, app connections. But most of your gameplay comes from the switching between your solid state drive and the internet. So you're playing basically off of your solid state drive, between their server and your solid state drive, your secondary drive. You're not playing between Steam and your computer. You're playing between the game loader, and you're going between the game loader and your computer. That's why the games are loaded onto your hard drives, is because you're operating between those two, their servers and your computer and that secondary drive. So the communication is there, and it's not on your operating system. I don't know why everybody thinks that it is. It's not. Okay. How I achieve having over 200 FPS on my RTX 4070 is because I take the load off of the solid state drive, putting it onto a separate drive away from the operating system. The games operate separate from your operating system. You'll see many reviewers put their games on a separate drive from their operating system. Why do they do that? This is the reason why. Is because when you access the game from the viewer, the Steam viewer, and once you hit play, it initializes between where you got the game stored on your drive to their servers. not the operating system. So a lot of confusion's been there, and I'm just clarifying this. If you want your games to run faster, you want the right amount of edge, this will give you that right amount of edge. That's if you want to do it that way or not. That's up to you. But I'm telling you how I got my PC set up, and it's no BS. That's just the way it's set up. I mean, you can tell by a person the way their computer's set up, and we'll go back to the action screen and I'll show you again. And I'll make it very clear. Right here on my D drive, I do all my editing, and I got my games loaded here. See where it says Steam Library? This is where I keep all my programs loaded right here. They're not on my operating system drive. They're right here. This is where I keep all the goodies because of the high-speed switching. There's nothing restricting this drive from doing what it's supposed to do. Nothing. Your operating system will have minimal switching between this drive and the drive you have the operating system on. Minimal switching. So, and most of that's in the cache anyway. You got the cache on that drive and you got the cache on this drive, and it's just basically flowing through the caches. So that's what makes mine a little bit faster and makes my games more efficient when I'm just basically running off the cache. So that's pretty much cut and dry. You know, what else are you gonna need? You ain't gonna need anything else. If you got the right amount of speed on your M.2 NVMe SSD, and I recommend on the reads 7,000 on the reads, and at least over between 5,000 and 7,000 on the writes is perfect speed for what you're trying to do. Unless they go to something faster, like direct drive, which Windows 11 is supposed to be hipped up on direct drive, but they haven't put it out there just yet. Because then they're going to require you to have a special M.2 that just works directly off of direct drive. I've been hearing about that too. So, this is the little, I'm not going to say this is a tutorial. This is more or less like a couple friends were asking me about how to set up theirs. How to set up their M.2 drive, because they're going to be, you know, getting a new one soon, and what's the best way to do it. This is the best way to do it, I've found, after all my testing, to operate the drives. I mean, everybody will probably say, I have somebody in the comments saying, oh, well, you don't do it that way, you know, blah, blah, blah. How do you know? Have you tested it? On the same motherboard that I got, have you tested it? All I could do is I could show you what I've done. I've tested and I've proved this is facts, not fiction. I'm just going to say that right now. It's facts, not fiction. It's not my opinion. It's facts. Because I'm still using the system, and I've been using the system like this for a whole year. A whole year. Well, not a whole year. Not a whole year. Okay. But I could say it's longer than 4 months. Because if I remember right, I just got my secondary M.2 drive. And this is like 4 months, I think it's been. So, but even at 4 months, operating it the way I did, it still runs better. Now, the way I had it set up before is I had the 3.0 drive still plugged into the same slot in the 3.0 section. And the 4.0 M.2 was not populated. Some people get to the point where they say, well, if you got only 2 M.2s, how can you be running your graphics card at PCIe 4.0 x16 with the M.2 4.0 in the same vicinity? You know, you can. It's not the operating system. That's the difference. Operating system will demand to have all 4 all 4 lanes. Or it'll demand to have 8 lanes from your graphics card. But since mine's set up through the coprocessor, and I don't want to hear anybody sit there and razz me, and you know what? Back then, years ago, that's what they called it, end of story, coprocessor. Coprocessor controls your USBs, it controls, the flow through with whatever else that your motherboard does, depending on that. So, to me, it's still the coprocessor. So if you don't like it, too bad. But then your operating system going through that is only mapping your motherboard for your hardware, which some of the mapping's done through your BIOS, so it shares 50% of the 50%. So basically your operating system is just mapping what it needs in the device manager, is what they call the mapping. So it's mapping all the drivers and everything else where they need to go, and that's pretty much all it's doing. So when your programs enable whatever from your operating system, which is cached, then it just links and goes. So it doesn't slow it down whatsoever. If you think it does, then maybe it's your motherboard. Maybe you got the wrong type motherboard, but I can tell you it does not slow it down. Running your operating system off of PCIe 3.0 X4 off of a 3.0 slot, it does not slow down the operating system, the switching of the operating system. Switching of the operating system doesn't need no more than between 4,000 and 5,000 reads or writes anyway. Because if you were to operate it off of a SATA drive, then you would get at least quarter to half that as it is. And you would notice there's only a little bit of slowdown when you're using your SATA drive compared to your M.2 drive. And your M.2 drive's running at twice to almost 3 times the speed, being at PCIe 3.0 X4 compared to the SATA drive being at 3.0 X1. You see the point. Hopefully you do. But anyway, it's not hard. I showed you how to set up your new drive, which is not hard. I've showed you how to plug in your drive, which is not hard. So basically, if you have your operating system, last kicker, and then we're going to call it right here. Before you put your secondary drive in, make sure your M.2 NVMe operating system drive is put in the right position first. Make sure you unplug your computer first before you do that. Very important to unplug your computer before switching your M.2 drive to a different slot. Make sure that if your M.2 drive is plugged into, let's say it's plugged in, you only got 2 slots and it's plugged into the 4.0 slot, but your M.2 NVMe is only 3.0, then take that and plug it down into the 3.0 slot. And then after that, you plug in your computer after you got it all set onto the motherboard, and then start your computer up, do one full cycle. That means starting it up, going into Windows, let it sit for 15 seconds, shutting your computer completely off, and then plug in your next drive, which would be your 4.0, and then starting up your computer, go into Windows, go into computer management or disk management, format your new drive, make sure it's unallocated, format it to a GPT, which it should automatically do because it's an M.2 drive. It should go to GPT automatically. But as you can see, mine says NTFS on Windows 11, but on Windows 10 it says GPT, just to tell you. For some reason, it's still on NTFS. Either way you look at it, because back then on the regular hard drives, it was master boot record, MBR. Just make sure it doesn't say MBR. Make sure it says, like I told you, the Damn, I keep forgetting the name of that. See what y'all are doing to me now? You know, but that's okay. Y'all can do that. Make sure it either says, make sure it doesn't say master boot record when you go to format it. If it gives you that option of master boot record, do not use that option. If it gives you GPT option, then use that option. If it says NTFS and you're on Windows 11, then it looks like it's going to be NTFS for Windows 11. So, but make sure it does not request you to use master boot record, because if you do, then you could wind up being messing up your drive really badly. M.2 solid state drives do not care for master boot record. Now, if it's a old HDD hard drive where it's running at 7200 RPM, that one you can still put it on NTFS or GPT sometimes, but mine are NTFS all the way across the board. From what my computer says right here, all my drives are NTFS. So that means they're set at the fastest speed I can get possible. Okay, now that we went through that whole song and dance, we are now at the end of the video, and if you made it this far, it is much appreciated. But what's even more appreciated is when you subscribe to the channel, put a positive like on the videos, and also too, make sure you turn on the notification bell so you know when I post the next video. But until the next time in the next video, you know it is, and we'll see you on the next one.